Welcome to Morning Brew for Marketing Executives, the podcast where senior B2B marketing leaders from globally recognized brands in complex industries share their stories and experiences. Here we dive into the world of marketing leadership and hear more about what it's like to be a marketing leader.
Hello, our podcast listeners today. This is a little bit different episode today. I'm just sharing alone here, first of all, so no guest here. And just wanted to clarify some of the most asked questions and something we have seen and get asked quite a lot in the recent times. And kind of the whole journey we have come through now, we are closing in on 1 year of hosting this podcast. I will share a little bit of background. Why did we start this podcast? Key stats, how many episodes, listeners, listening times, and the hours listened. Of course, our main learnings from this full year of podcasting. This is the first time around we host a podcast as Mavenfirst and first time for me as a podcast host as well. And then I will end sharing a couple ideas what we have in the store for you for 2026. So we will definitely continue using platform to have great guests in line and share their learnings and opinions and expertise with you, our audience. But without further ado, I think the most asked question when we first meet with the new potential guests or someone in our executive roundtables or somewhere else ask like, hey, what's the reason for the podcast? The main reason is we see a fit with the market need and then what our business needs are. And I think that's an important point that we see more and more podcasts for multiple topics. I think that kind of gives you that tight angle and gives you focus when your goals are in line and keeps you focused in every decision you made, who we will invite, how we structure things, how we promote things. And the main reason, first of all, what kicked off this about a little bit more than a year ago, the planning, was that we have held executive roundtables since 2022. The concept is very simple. It's senior marketing executives, CMOs, directors meet up where we provide some overarching topic to discuss. We have had topics like how is it to work with the management team, value communication, etc. We host this in Stockholm, Copenhagen, and Helsinki. So we gather 10 CMOs in the same place and we discuss in very confidential environment the challenges and such. And from there, we had a feedback session last year. And in a couple of those feedback sessions, it was brought up that it would be great to listen the backstories and the learnings from some of the CMOs because they feel that the roundtable concept is so tight-knit. It's only for executives leading a team in very complex B2B setting. So long sales cycles, traditional organizational models, sales expertise driven organization, sales expertise, in some cases, engineer-led organization. And then we did some due diligence, or my colleague Annika, who is in charge of this podcast, I have the easy role, I'm just the host. So Annika did some due diligence. Is there a podcast dedicated to leadership topics in marketing? Yes. Is there a podcast dedicated to B2B and in the complex side, so putting the SaaS business out, dedicated to that? And we didn't find any. And then we kind of planned a little bit and have a trial or like minimal viable product to just ask some of our clients in the segment and in the target group, how would they feel about these kind of topics for this format, and they get to give us the green light. So it was easy for us, and we dedicated and commit that, yes, let's try 1 year, see what's the feedback and how things go. So that's kind of the market need, or at least there's a initial like need, or there's almost like white space for this topic. The other part is, of course, working in a company that needs to die. If we want to dedicate our time and resources to something and don't want to do it half-assed, it needs to be aligned with our business goals and be kind of in the way we do business. And I will come back to that a little bit later, but I think that's kind of nicely timed because we have already decided that we want to focus more on localizing our presence in the Swedish market and also in Denmark and Norway. And if I think like our goals as a business at the time, it's like we need to grow, even though we have worked with clients in 20 something countries, it's mostly inbound or word of mouth without much go-to-market activities. And now we have already made a change there that now we will focus more on the actual active go-to-market for our key markets in the Nordics. And to be successful with that, without the known brand familiarity is one thing we wanted to build up. And I think this is one tool in the toolbox to build that brand familiarity, and also like one key tool for us to show we are active in the client sector in the Nordics or Northern Europe, and if I count Netherlands and the UK there as well. So kind of aligned goals, the need and our business aligned. I think that's a key thing here. So that's the kind of why we started this podcast. And key stats. We have recorded 15 episodes, 13 published, and 1 episode unpublished after the publishing, because basically what happened, the corporate wasn't aligned what was said in the episode, and it was something like 3 days, 4 days public, and then we get the ask, can you unpublish this? So 13 published initially, but 12 published now. And also we have 2 episodes recorded, but we haven't get the green light for the episodes yet, or let's see if we get at all. Of course, we have already planned interviews for next year. If I look this year, 2025, we also have a couple episodes that we have gone through the planning, but we haven't recorded due to changes in the guest side. Maybe there's a role change, some organizational shifts happening. So just to give you a picture how this looks from our end. We have mainly published in 3 main channels, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. Main listeners are on Spotify. I think that goes hand in hand with our target audience, how they want to consume content. Our target audience is someone working in an executive position, in a similar position that our guests are in. So leading a team, having some sort of autonomy, that changes a little bit, and in complex B2B. So leading a marketing in complex B2B with some level of autonomy. And Spotify is definitely like 80% of our listeners and viewers. YouTube after that, the Apple Podcast is somewhere along the line as well. Our main promotional channel has been on LinkedIn because of the targeting, and of course organic is the most important channel at this stage. That's something we want to change up a little bit for the next year as well. But if I look the stats after 1 year and 12 published episodes, we have 67 subscribers, active subscribers. We have around 800 to 1,000 listening times, depending how we combine all the platforms, and around 150, 200 hours of listening time. So what we see from the stats, you kind of pick and choose what episodes you listen. Of course, we have some heavy users that probably listen every episode as we published. I'm not sure if that's my mom or my dad or someone I know, maybe, I'm not sure. But just to give you a perspective on that, I will come back to these stats a little bit later. Mostly listened episodes, we have our first episode with Sandra Anderstedt from Sandvik about the ambassador program and goal setting. If you haven't listened in that, I highly recommend you do, as of course, all our episodes. Then we have the second episode, Patricia Namba from Atlas Copco, a little bit about how different it is to work in the decentralized compared to centralized marketing department and the different views on that. And third, quite surprisingly, Matti Tiitinen from Valtra Akko and how I lead my marketing department. And if I come back to the stats, 67 subscribers, around 200 hours of listening experience consuming this podcast, around 800 to 1,000 listening times. Is this enough? Is this a lot? Is this aligned with our goals for this? And I think this is something I see in our clients and advising our clients, that they get really bogged down when talking with their stakeholders. Because, of course, we're not going to win the Business Podcast of the Year award with this kind of subscriber counts or listening times. But does that really matter in the end? If I think this podcast as a very, very niche podcast, leadership topics for leaders leading B2B marketing in the complex B2B, and also with Northern European views. I think there's a little bit difference if we compare Southern Europe or US or Asia Pacific. The marketing, the maturity and things are a little bit different. So I think that's a good point. And how we view this, our target market in Northern Europe, our main geographical targets are approximately 600 companies. So around 350 in the Nordics, and then we add also Netherlands and UK. So we have a pretty good ideal customer profile. Now, when we look at that 67 subscribers or around 800 to 1,000 listening times, it's always something you need to put in the perspective of your target audience. And we are very happy. We didn't have any kind of direct goals, just that we dedicate 1 year and we try to get past 15 episodes. We recorded those 15, unfortunately, for many reasons. We eventually got 12 published. We didn't have any goals around how many subscribers. We just wanted to dedicate ourselves into the process and do quality content on that. So I think that's a good kind of learning also for complex in B2B complex industry, where you always have very clarified segments, buyer groups, ideal customer profiles, and this whole target account list is probably smaller compared to many else. So we feel that this is going hand in hand with our goals, but of course, every goal is different, and we are very happy with the results. Of course, we always want to improve, but just to give you a kind of perspective. And also, I like to think through from an angle that if I take this as a managing director position in a consultancy, would I decommission this for next year, putting all the investment, time, and money? Or why I would do that, and what's the reason for that? And I think the main thing is basically coming from 3 parts. The business reason, we know the supports are, of course, brand familiarity in our target market. It's very hard to measure by numbers, but we believe in the process. Secondly, I think it's important that when we look the data in our disposal and also the anecdotal evidence we have heard from roundtable attendees, from our guests, and the feedback they have got after the episode, it's good feedback. We get the feedback from our target audience, so we kind of know from an anecdotal evidence standpoint that we reach the people we want to reach, and they feel this is something of an important for them. But of course, this is anecdotal, so if you have any feedback on how could we improve, how you liked these episodes, send a comment, send a message on LinkedIn, or any way or form that you feel most convenient for you, and give your perspective. I'm more than happy to read those, and I promise I will answer every comment you send to us. So just to wrap up on the key stats side of things. When I look the main learnings from this, I like to think it through from as a hosting standpoint. I think this is very different format to comparing. I have been probably in hosting webinars for maybe over 10 years, 15 years almost, in live events, in big stage, keynote events, in smaller stage, facilitated conversations, roundtables. I think this is a little bit different format. And this is something I try to learn as a host to improve, keeping the tone of the episode conversational, but still have those questions that I know will be valuable to you, our listeners. So that's always something on my mind, how to dive to the conversation, but still be able to kind of dig the nuggets from our guests for benefit for you. So I think that's something I try to improve every episode. It's very different platform, and it's something when you have a guest, not someone you know from before, or maybe even if you know them before, it's a little bit different than let's say hosting a webinar or having a keynote. You know how it's gonna turn out. You have the start, middle point, turning point, and ending. But how can you build that something that is almost growing and moving naturally, depending on where the conversation is going, and how you make sure you can still, as a host, dive the nuggets and value from that conversation. So I think that's something I have learned and tried to listen myself. And it's always a good feedback if you listen in yourself 1 year ago and you see multiple things you could improve. And one big thing, we have had multiple things. We have outsourced editing, and what's something I get feedback that active listening doesn't work in this format. Stop it. It doesn't work. And that's something I'm accustomed to do. So when someone says something, I'm like, very good point. Interesting. And that's very hard to relearn to not to do. So I think that's big thing for me as a host, how to improve. Production time. I think the guest pipeline and production time is something that there's always things happening. Of course, I know this is not the number one priority for any of our guests. They have a business to run, they have marketing department to run, they have multiple things, and this is kind of add on that. So I think that's something we try to improve coming next year, the production time, making it easier for our guests to approve things and more finalized. Also, the guest pipeline that we have, we would like to have more frequent episodes published. I can't promise you every bi-weekly episode, but something we try to improve, that we have more guests in the pipeline, more re-recordings, so we can mitigate those sudden challenges we see along the year and something happens, so we always have a pipeline of episodes ready to come in. That's something we try to improve, definitely. Also, one learning is planning and scheduling takes time. If you are planning to start your company podcast or your personal podcast, I think the planning and scheduling takes time, and we changed that in midpoint this year. First, we wanted to have the pre-planning session with our guests and then the recording session. Based on the feedback, and when we a little bit changed the angle to more towards how I lead my marketing department, we also did the planning session if our guests don't need that. But it was very surprising that for many of our guests, I think, I wouldn't say not all, but for most our guests, this is the first podcast they are in. And so it's a new experience from them as well. So I tried to also focus on how to make them feel comfortable. And if they wanted to have that planning session beforehand, of course, we can do that. If you think about starting a podcast or you have a podcast, I think you know that the planning and scheduling takes probably more time than you to first anticipate. And last but not least, I think the start somewhere and have a goal have goals in mind when you make every decision. And I think that's something that, of course, when I look Joe Rogan podcast or any of the big podcasts out there, you see the editorial quality, production quality and everything, and you want to match that because that's the expectation from the listener. But we're going to take the other route that, hey, let's commit to this. Let's test this angle. Let's test this content and format and commit to 1 year. And if the results are in line what we expect, the feedback is good, the guest experience is well received, and this is something guests would like to come, then we can try to kind of improve the production quality. Of course, there's always a baseline you need to meet, but just to kind of, it would be easy to kind of have those hundred of things that I don't have 5 cameras here. Oh, now I'm recording this from my home office, so I only have 1 camera, not even the most professional background. But just kind of progress is more than perfection. So try to progress and have those in place. So I think that's our mindset around that. And also, I think the commitment to the episode is so stat that most podcasts from some podcast platform, that most podcasts die before the 7th or 8th episode. So we are well past that, and we are committed to the next year episode as well. I think that's a good, because there's a learning curve, definitely. You want to hone in your hosting abilities, or if you're doing solo podcast, your presentation abilities. And of course, there's also learning curve on the topics, how to, and maybe on the editor side as well. I really definitely see we want to crisp our editing in the finished products. So just to take that into account, there's a learning curve. And if I start swimming now, I don't want to compare myself to Phelps instantly. So probably that doesn't suit you. So just the kind of idea from there. Our ideas for the next year, we have different topics in planning, pump up the content, keeping quality in mind, but try to be more frequent, and means a little bit more content on the side. And that's something we want to focus on, the guest pipeline. So if you have, or if you are someone working and leading your team in B2B complex, give me a shout out that if you feel that you have something to share and you would like to participate, we can definitely plan something out. So I think focus on the quality of the content and on more frequent public. Another thing is the technical quality. That's something we try to work out with our partner in the editing side, and also on the voice acting, voiceover, and making it a little bit crisp and clear. That's one development area for us. And then we have a couple of new ideas on the promotion side as well. I think that's a big thing now. All this has kind of grow mostly organic. In LinkedIn, we have used that to get go, but when we get the ball rolling, we wanted to see how the organic growth looks like. But that's definitely something we try to improve next year there. But just kind of quick run out how I feel after 1 year of podcasting, our main learnings. And I think the key takeaway from this, if you are working in B2B complex sales industry and you are running a marketing organization, it's very hard to put that attribution date. I haven't seen any leads coming from this podcast, but how could you still measure, and how important those anecdotal evidence, feedback from our guests, how they get feedback from their episode, how they tell me afterwards that how many people contacted them and wanted to learn more about the topic, depending on the episode, the feedback we got, just to kind of, hey, good job, or this was well, very good episode, this particularly, or something like that. So I think that's a good thing. And also on the numbers, if you're not trying to build the CEO diary level or Joe Rogan level audience or platform, if your target is closer to your actual ideal customers, it doesn't probably need 10,000 views or listeners per episode, or maybe it needs, but just keep that in mind. Because in essence, if I think with 1 year of podcasting, I believe most go hand in hand with the demographics of our main target persons who listen this. And if we have reached 10% with this, audio format and podcast format, I think that's a great success. So just to I think that's one key takeaway. But now, short holiday break before we continue in January. It would be very, very boring to host a podcast if nobody listens. So thank you, our listeners, for listening to this. I'm more than happy to get any feedback you have. Is that on the production quality, on the topics, contents, or personally to me as a host? Anything, send it to me, and I promise to respond to every feedback you send. Of course, thank you all the guests during the year being part of this podcast and sharing your insights. I know you have the feedback from the episode. I know it's well received, and based on the feedback we have, it's well received. So thank you all our guests as well. And on the internal side, Annika is running the whole podcast process from our side. So thank you, Annika, as well. I have the easy job hosting. All the heavy lifting happens with Annika's tight coordination with our partners. So thank you, Annika, and our editor partners as well. But now let's focus on the holiday season. I know it's a busy time for all of you. Try to relax and see you next year with a couple new plans and ideas on this show. So take care, happy holidays, and ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening to Morning Brew for Marketing Executives. We hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us bring you more stories from marketing leaders. This podcast is produced by Mavenfirst. For more information, please visit mavenfirst.com.